you grew up in the church, maybe hundreds. I'm actually fairly sure, if you don't know Jesus, you may have heard of the Good Samaritan. The majority of you in this room, whether you know Jesus or not, will have at least heard of this story. This parable has been mentioned by some of the most famous people in the world. Previous Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher said, "No one would remember the Good Samaritan if he'd had only good intentions." He had money as well. This parable has been a long time mentioned and recounted. And why? I think often because it seemed to contain a vaguely kind message. Be kind. Do good. Be nice to others. Which, there's nothing wrong with that. Like, be kind. Be great. But it isn't what this passage is about. For the most part, maybe, because it's shared in a diluted state, it's often minimized, so that we can feel good about ourselves. Or even use it in a compelling political speech. But here in this parable is something fundamental about Jesus' kingdom worldview. Now, the first few verses set us up for what is to be one of the greatest challenges in our current and divided world. Who is my neighbour? So starting at the beginning, the expert on the law, and by law we mean religious Jewish law, not the law we have today, asks Jesus the question, "What shall I do to inherit eternal life?" Jesus prompts the expert into thinking what the answer could be. And, the expert ultimately responds well. He quotes two fundamental Old Testament verses, Deuteronomy 6, verse 5, and Leviticus 19, verse 18. He says, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, with all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself." Now, these verses were long established in Jewish custom and practice. Firstly, that passage in Leviticus, as a whole, goes on and on about how to treat your neighbor. Just a few verses here. "You shall not oppress your neighbor or rob him. You shall not go around as a slanderer among your people, and you shall not stand up against the life of your neighbor. You shall not take vengeance or bear a grudge against the sons of your own people, but you shall love your neighbor as yourself." It was not unfamiliar to this expert on how to treat his neighbor. But his follow-up question is what brought an upending to his assumed worldview as a good and devout Jew. Now, through this expert's lens, he's expecting Jesus to respond with a list of those who naturally include his fellow Jew who keeps the law in precise fashion. His neighbors are limited to the sons of your own people, as Leviticus puts it. But Jesus responds with this parable, where the expert's idea of his neighbor end up as those who turn their back on those in need. First, we have the priest. Now, the priests were important leaders in Jewish order. They served at the temples, they had high reputations, they were pillars in the community. Priests fiercely abided by Jewish law and were arguably the most knowledgeable in it. And yet, this man ignores a fundamental principle, something called patchy. Sorry for any Hebrew speakers. Which is to preserve human life above almost all other religious obligations. We can also acknowledge that as Jewish law states, priests are refrained from touching a corpse. They're deemed unclean, and the priest would have to go through a thorough cleansing ritual, which would prevent him from fulfilling his other work. But secondly, he moved to the other side. That action alone shows a disregard and even distancing from the problem. He didn't even know if this man was dead or not. And he didn't bother to find out. It's obvious to us that there is a problem here, right? And it's with the heart. likely motivated by the need to do the proper thing, follow the rules. He was so preoccupied by following these rules of what's right that he ended up going about the whole thing the wrong way. It led him short of the sort of compassion his law clearly asked of him. The Levite, who is second to arrive on the scene, here is also an upstanding Jewish citizen. Levites are the ones who assist the priests in the temple, so he would also know of the code of nefesh, the compassion asked of him. We have to watch ourselves here. So often, we can be in danger of returning to religiosity and striving to get it right, rather than loving as God has shown us. Don't look far. Think here, in the church, right? Someone once said to me, in the way that we don't get to choose our families, it's not up to us who's in the church either. Everyone here is unique. You might not like the same football team as them, and that's okay. The grace and freedom given by Christ is not for us to hand out on selective merit or who we think deserves to be here. We can also get distracted by what's right and risk our own passivity in our church community. We can so easily miss something important going on in someone's life if we're too focused at the task at hand. We can get preoccupied by how things in our church and community should be and forget the heart. See here, both the priest and the Levite did not step in to help the man in need. It is in fact the one who is so utterly deemed the other in that society in ancient Israel that is the one who turns up to the rod and beaten man. Now, the Jews and Samaritans did not get along. So the majority of the time, if a Jewish person had to journey through Samaria to Galilee in northern Israel, for instance, they would add days to their journey and go around on a different route. This animosity ran deep. We can actually read of their conflicts for centuries before Jesus' lifetime, some 800 years worth. Notice in verse 37, after the whole story, the expert still doesn't call the Samaritan by name. Here's the crux of Jesus' parable, is that love is shown by the bad guy. Whatever the depths of conflict these two people groups have, Jesus makes the point that love goes beyond these borders, these internal limitations. Now, we also have these internal limitations today. Different? Sure. But they're there. And they're constantly at war with each other, fracturing our societies. And it's not going unnoticed. Big thinkers and writers of today are commenting a lot on what people call expressive individualism and tribalism. So with expressive individualism, or commonly known as the modern self, we have the notion that the real me is my inner feelings and my authenticity is acting out those feelings. It greatly impacts how you interact with people. It leads you to expect the same of others, and when society doesn't change to match your authentic self, society becomes the enemy. The theologian Miroslav Volf describes the animosity that comes from this worldview as this: these struggles are morally hypercharged and utterly devoid of self-criticism. With the zeal of fundamentalists, combatants inhabit different moral universes and struggle against each other in the name of their own non-negotiable values. What Wolf is saying is we have a spider's web of multiple authentic identities, all being right, all longing to be affirmed, and And no matter if someone has a difference of opinion, different worldview, when we don't get that affirmation, we revolt. If everyone's inner truth is considered sacred, any constructive criticism or attempt to correct harmful internal habits can be perceived as an attack. That's the thing with core identity. Because the self reigns supreme, self-fulfillment becomes the motivator. And community, connection, dwindles. If you don't agree with me, who I say I am, what I'm doing, you're my enemy. It is me, myself, and I at the deepest. The other concept is tribalism. Now look, we all want to belong. It is what it means to be human. You know, God designed us for connection, for community, all stemmed from communion with Him. But tribalism takes that belonging and darkly twists it. From belonging into us versus them. It is rooted in the distrust of the other. The more threatened we feel, the more we turn to our tribe for safety and reassurance. And the loyalty that lies in that fear leads us to turn on anyone who says otherwise, who belongs to a different worldview, a different tribe. The World Economic Forum wrote an article on the global crisis of tribalism and explained the perfect storm we face as weaker social connectedness and the erosion of local community life. These forces often play into existing fault lines in societies, widening racial, religious, and ideological divisions. The more polarized a society, the more people view difficult issues through a tribal lens, rather than in terms of the common good of all. In today's world, through the lens of expressive individualism, we can say my neighbor is whoever affirms me as my authentic self. Or through the tribal lens, you can say my neighbor is my fellow Rangers fan, my other Swifties, my LGBTQ plus community, my far-right conservatives. Contrary to popular understanding, this story is not about random acts of kindness. It's about flipping your worldview on its head and reaching out to and loving those who are hated by you, feared by you, shunned by you, to love as your neighbor. It takes one look at the news to see we live in a polarized world today. In this parable, we are called to inhabit a different world. One where we intentionally come near and see the other, the outsider, the enemy, and respond with the same radical compassion that Jesus has shown us. The question, who is my neighbor, isn't directly answered by Jesus. Instead, he reflects on the bigger question: to whom must I become a neighbor? It's not a matter of who qualifies for my care, but it reflects the original question back on ourselves. It's about who we choose to be, and Jesus is calling us to be compassionate people. Now, compassion is a mess, right? You're dealing with people. It's not a theology, not an ideology, it's not a formula. overwhelming desire for something. Your insides twisting. That's what Jesus feels for people. And this word is used throughout the Gospels, and it's all to do with Jesus. Matthew 6:36, when he saw the crowds, he had compassion on them because they were harassed and helpless, like sheep without a shepherd. Matthew 24:34, Jesus had compassion on them and touched their eyes. Immediately, they received their sight and followed him. Luke 15:20, so he got up and went to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion for him. And you know what? No one is excluded from this. No tribe, no tongue, no individual. Jesus' compassion is not limited to who we deem worthy, to who affirms me or not, to who is in the same tribe as me or not. I don't know about you, this is the hardest part for me to get my hypocritical head around. I get your compassion. I can't be compassionate to them. I don't know if you've thought that. I know I have. And it's important to know that righteous anger is a thing. We are not to stick our heads in the sand, pretend everything's fine and dandy when injustices are happening. For us not to stand for what is good and sacred according to God. But as we acknowledge that biblical truth, we have to understand that exclusion and condemnation must not be a part of it. In this story, Jesus shows us his divine solidarity and divine self-giving with both one and the other, the right and the left, victim and the enemy. It's a lot easier said than done. And please hear me, this is not a guilt trip. It is a reality check. Are we walking in that bow-yearning compassion for others, really? I'll be the first to confess, so often, that's not my story. Some of you may know, but I grew up with a dad who was a minister for the Church of Scotland. It was eventful. We lived in a manse, the house that's associated to and owned by the church. So everyone and anyone knew where the minister lived. And with that came many door callers. So people who would ring the doorbell looking for money, food, shelter, even just a chat, to be honest. And as I grew older, the more challenged I was by how many people I saw come by our door. Surely what we're doing isn't helping. Like, will it ever be enough? So I asked my dad this one day. He said this: the world has enough cynics. I refuse to be one more. I've never forgotten that conversation, and I'm too often humbled by it. The theologian N.T. Wright puts it a little more bluntly. No church, no Christian can remain content with living life in a way that allows us to watch most of the world lying half dead in the road and pass by. This is who Jesus is. It's who he calls us to be. To have our bowels yearn for those around us, no matter who they are. The Good Samaritan shows us this in the most perfect and humbling splendor. It shows us what compassion looks like in the new kingdom, in Jesus' kingdom in which we are living now. Jesus' radical compassion is active and costly. He came down for us. He touched the unclean. His radical compassion is for all who come to the foot of the cross. Tribe, modern self aside. The assurance we have from Jesus is more than whatever the world can offer. And it is the assurance that we can offer to others. It comes back to how Jesus yearns for us. Who am I? Who am I to deserve his loving compassion? Well, I am the naked and bare, beaten, half dead man on the side of the road. And it is Jesus who stopped, came to me, healed my wounds, lifted me up, and washed the dirt and my sins away with his blood. He extends a costly demonstration of unexpected love to the wounded man. Does. And you know what? He is also that same bare, beaten, shamed man on the roadside. He took the punishment for us. He took the suffering and bore our shame. All because of the compassion he has for us. This parable shows us what it's like to love as he loves. Looking back at the first Deuteronomy verse that the expert quotes in his answer back to Jesus, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, with all your mind. This is important. It is through Jesus' compassion for us that we are able to live out of that overflow. To seek true compassion for this world is to seek how our Father in heaven sees it. Only when we truly accept our saving grace and love our Lord, our God, with all our heart, soul, mind, and strength, can that window begin to come into view. We cannot try to be compassionate people if we don't understand his compassion for us. Having seen what Christ does for us in the gospel, and then now having his Spirit live in us, the Spirit of love, we do all things in the strength that he gives us. This wonderful and confronting story illustrates for us the beauty and glory of what Jesus Christ has done for us. If you're here and you don't know Jesus yet, there is an open arm invitation waiting for you. He sees you. He loves you. Would it be that seeing his radical compassion for us, seeing the wonder of his love, would that so change us? Transform us, that the natural impulse of our hearts would be to share that same kind of love with others as we follow Christ. We're going to come into worship and reflection in a minute, and I wonder if you would sit with that for a moment. Ask, how can I walk in his merciful overflow? do I see in my community? Who do I see struggling? That person I was too busy to chat with. Can I put in the time? How do I navigate and bridge the division I see? Perhaps the division I'm a part of. We serve as we are empowered by the Spirit of Christ living with us. It's not about if they qualify as our neighbour. It's about how we are called to be the neighbour. And please don't hear this parable and think, okay, I'll be a good person. Or think what I've just said is for you to strive for like an imagined holy checklist or something. Our works can't save. Set your eyes on Jesus. Seek Him first. Everything will follow. We do this because He's done this for us. And perhaps you are sitting here and thinking, I have nothing left to give. I'm empty. How on earth am I meant to be there for others? Matthew 11:28. Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me. For I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Come to Him. Rest at the foot of the cross and let His love for you sink deeply. Jesus came into our world, met with us in our state, and loved us. He saved us at the roadside. Let us walk with Him. Let us be His hands and His feet here and now, sharing His love out of the overflow that He has for us. 1 John 4:19. We love